So, welcome to the RevMD podcast with me, Dr. Durst, your host. And then I have a special guest on today. It's Mark White, and he is the founder of GainesWave and now the OmniWave movement, so acoustic shockwave for men. And so, welcome, Mark. I am so excited to have you on.
I'm excited to be here. I love talking about this stuff, and I've known you now for 6 or 7 years, and I think what you've accomplished is amazing.
Yeah, well, I think that this goes way back to the beginning when I opened the practice. I met you then and at an
I
A4
remember.
conference, and so I was just learning about the sexual wellness back then, and it's been an amazing journey since. But I think what you were doing and starting was obviously something that was very much needed. And when I opened the practice, which is when I met you, that sexual wellness component took off right away because there's not enough people offering that service, and it's hugely needed. So you can even just go into the beginning of that. I know now, and this has been a big topic of the radial versus focused shockwave. And so switching over to that, they'll want to hear about too. But tell me again a little bit. It's been a while since you've been on the podcast, how you came to, I think it's a great story of how you came to start with the GainesWave movement.
Sure. So we owned a practice here in South Florida. And the funny thing is, I'm not a provider. I think of myself as a healthcare entrepreneur. I love the longevity space. And in 2001, we opened up a practice in South Florida called Health Gains. And Health Gains was focused on optimizing hormone levels. And this was way ahead of the curve. At the time, there were only just a few practices that were actually doing testosterone replacement. Like we were seen as the crazy ones.
Mm.
And as we started putting men on testosterone, a lot of guys were coming to us and said, testosterone's great, my libido's great. I just can't get an erection. Can you please prescribe me Viagra? So we were writing a lot of prescriptions for Viagra. This is in 2012, 2013. Our medical director at the time, he actually got certified in a treatment called P-Shot. And as we know, P-Shot is where you use your own blood, you spin it, and then you inject that blood into the penis. And there's also the O-Shot and the vampire facelift. So we started marketing P shots and O shots, and we were really good at marketing. And we had men from all over the country who would actually fly into our practice here in South Florida to do a P shot. We also had a lot of men who were saying, you know what, P shot, you say needles, I'm not interested. Like, don't get a needle anywhere near my penis. And we're always thinking if there's a way you can figure out how to do a needle-free pea shot, it would be pretty amazing. So in 2016, we read an article that was in Men's Health, and the article said, "Is this the next Viagra?" And they talked about shockwave therapy and using something known as shockwave therapy to optimize erectile performance. I didn't know what shockwave therapy was. Searched the internet. Nobody in the United States was doing it. And the doctor who was with us, our medical director, went through all the studies. He said, you know what, Mark, this might work. We just need a machine. I didn't know the difference between radial, focused. All I know is I needed a shockwave device. And we ended up getting a radial device into our practice. And we figured out some protocols, started playing with protocols, and we decided we were going to do a 1 month pilot. We were going to start testing this on our patients. One of the patients, he was a swinger, and I guess in the swinger community, I'm not a swinger, but in the swinger community, like if you can't get an erection, your life is over. And he tried P-Shot, got bruising. He hated the Viagra because it gave him headaches. And I said, you're going to be our first patient we're trying with this. We've never tried this before. We're going to provide it to you for free. Let me know how you do. Next day, I come into my office, and the voicemail on my phone was beeping, and he said, "This is Steve. You need to call me right away." And I was like, "Oh my God, what did we do?" And I picked up the phone and called him, and he said, "You know what, Mark? I don't know what you did, but I had erections all night long. This was amazing. I want to go ahead and book my next appointment. And so we ended up getting the same response from other people. And I then had it tried on myself, and it was really amazing. You get great erections, your sensitivity is much higher. So we started to offer it to our patients, but we didn't know what to call it. I knew I wasn't going to call it Shockwave because, if people didn't want a shot in their penis, nobody's going to want a shock to their penis. And it actually isn't a shockwave. I can get into the mechanics of what it actually does and how it helps people. So we trademarked the name GainesWave, and we started talking about it. We got listed on the news. We talked about it on Ben Greenfield and Joe Rogan and some other people were talking about it. And before I knew it, people were calling us from all over the country saying, "Where can I find a GainesWave provider?"
Mm-hmm.
So we started training GainesWave providers like yourself since 2017, and we started educating the public. And then we created a directory listing so that when people want to get a GainesWave, they can find a local provider who's been properly trained near them.
And that's how it all started, huh? And that's when I came on board was 2018, right after
Yeah, I met you in 2018. We had some good times. I remember good times in Dallas. It was fun.
down,
Um,
down in
right
Miami, came down to learn
down
all,
in Miami.
yeah. And again, an amazing office and movement. And even now, today, before we even get into the progression to OmniWave or more focused Shockwave, I will just say that there's a lot of providers, and we have this conversation. We do a comprehensive sexual wellness, but we don't ever offer any of the sexual wellness that isn't a comprehensive, that includes the acoustic shockwave with the other. And even if people will push or men will push for the P shot, sometimes I always prep with acoustic, and then once they're introduced to that, they know how good it works at regeneration. But I think that that was such a big thing because there was such a need for it, and so we do a combination already of everything that we do and comprehensively, but it's been a huge missing piece. And I know that men have lots of questions on it. And, there's even home devices we can talk about a little bit. But
Mhm.
I think one of the bigger questions that I had, and it was perfect timing, I was looking at some of the podcasts related to the acoustic shockwave. And I hadn't had you on in such a long time that I reached back out to you, and at the same time, I was already questioning the radial versus the acoustic, the radial versus the focused. And here we were. You had OmniWave. You were already again ahead of the curve and progressing that acoustic shock wave in treatment, and not just in sexual wellness. But I do have a focus of sexual wellness.
Yeah.
But then we can also talk about longevity because that's every single one of our patients also have longevity questions, concerns, or services that they want. So when you are um, switching over from a radial to a focused, that's what the GainesWave to OmniWave is.
Well, GainesWave's not a device, and I think that's probably one of the biggest thing I hear that people get wrong. GainesWave's really the treatment, the same way a P shot's a treatment, the same way the O shot's a treatment. GainesWave's a treatment protocol. And the device you use to accomplish that treatment protocol, we would make suggestions. We were at the time in 2017 using what's known as a radial device. And I think just so people understand what is a radial device and what is a focus device and actually what is shockwave, I think it's really important to understand it because it took me a little time to understand what is shockwave. And what shockwave actually is it's the shockwave that occurs when you hear the breaking of a sound barrier. So anybody that's listening to this that's been to an air and sea show and they've seen a jet break the barrier sound, you're going to hear a sonic boom.
Mm-hmm.
So with a sonic boom, you hear it and then you feel a wave of pressure. So what's actually causing everything good to happen inside the body is that wave of pressure. It's creating a little bit of micro trauma And that micro trauma then stimulates your own body's natural healing process. So, really, it's just non invasive regenerative medicine.
Mhm.
Um, Now, when you're talking about a radial wave, one of the things that when you get into it, first of all, in the United States, anybody can call anything a shockwave, and I think that's become a huge problem. I could go out and say this is a shockwave or that's a shockwave because there's nothing that regulates calling anything a shockwave. And radio wave devices actually don't even break the barrier of sound. So technically, they're not shockwave devices. They're acoustic wave devices, and they do cause some healing at the surface of the skin. So on a radial device, or let's say I took a nail and started hammering it up against your body with a hammer, like a little nail or a little stick, you'll get a little bit of inflammation, microinflammation. It'll turn red and then it'll start healing a little bit. People actually have used that on trigger points or acupuncture on trigger points. So you'll see like stuff done on the skin. So a radial device will work fine if you're doing trigger points. Now, if you're doing the penis and you're just going up and down the blood vessels of the penis, it's going to work fine. It's going to be a little painful, so that some doctors have to numb the penis
Mhm.
because it's got a long rise time. And we can get into like what is a rise time. It's going to take a lot longer to get results. So generally on a radial device, if you're doing GainesWave on a radial device, it could take 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes to do a treatment. And a patient has to come in 6 times, 12 times. And a lot of times they will use numbing cream, which actually isn't that pleasant. When we were looking at the clinical studies, we had heard about a focus device. We had heard about the radial device. And at the time in the United States, there were not a lot of commercially available focus devices.
Mhm.
All the radial devices, though, they were relatively easy to obtain. So, and when you look at the clinical studies, you'll see that for erectile dysfunction and performance, radial waves and focus waves seem to have the same efficacy.
Mhm.
Um, a focused wave is generally now you're getting into what a true shock wave. And if you have heard of lithotripsy is where you're breaking up a kidney stone. That is with what they call an electrohydraulic focused wave. The
Mhm.
best way to think about an electrohydraulic focused wave, say, versus well, an electrohydraulic focused wave is a spark, like a radial. It's a spark. It looks like an electrode, like something you would have, like a spark plug in a car that creates an electrode. That spark then goes off in motor and it creates a plasma bubble, and that plasma bubble creates that shock wave. And that shock wave is basically 1,500 meters per second. It's a small, very focused sonic boom that's about 4 or 5 inches long and about half an inch deep, and it's very, very effective.
Okay.
Now, with the right with the right shock wave there, what you do is it's not going to hurt, and you can actually start healing within minutes, like within 2 to 3 minutes instead of 20 minutes, which really is a game changer.
So when I started to look at radio versus focused, and a lot of times, it's a also our patients are very educated with it. They'll come in and they'll ask great questions. It was hard to deep dive in the US. I was having trouble figuring out what machine. So I agree with you that it isn't information that's easily accessible here, which is why I'd kind of put it off because I won't put anything into practice until I really deep dive into it. And then I agree with you as well that people will call it anything, and that was one of my initial points. But then I got distracted. It didn't come right through with it. But we have a ton of patients that come to us because they've been to a place that call it something, and they're unhappy with the results. And so they're hesitant to move forward with the sexual wellness treatments with us because they think it's not going to work because they had ineffective treatments. And I try and tell them that there are provider networks and there's protocols. So yes, GainesWave just being a protocol, but also the providers are investing in the machines that everyone are using, so acceptable machines, but also those protocols. And if they're not investing, and that's what we tell our patients, if that provider is just throwing up a generic name and they're opening an office in some, small 300 square foot space, and they buy a machine and they call it shockwave therapy for erectile dysfunction, and then they're unhappy with the results, it's because that person hasn't actually invested the time and money into getting trained adequately. And so these provider networks, such as GainesWave, OmniWave, and even the Cellular Medicine Association with all the, PSHOT, those are provider networks, and those providers are actually investing time and money to do it the right way.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think the biggest challenge is that because anybody can go out and buy any machine, a patient don't know what they're getting, and then they go and meet a doctor that has a cheap device from China, who's never been properly trained, who's not part of any type of network. They have a bad experience, and they say, well, I got Shockwave and it didn't work. When the reality is, if you have a very well-trained doctor who knows what they're doing and they have access to different resources where they can talk to other doctors and they have access to good devices, um, then you know that you're going to get better results. And that's one of the things we wanted to do with GainesWave, was provide a directory listing and say that these doctors have been certified.
Yes.
Um, and I think one of the things early on that actually, I think as we got into it and started working with more and more doctors and really started to develop the whole industry, was really understanding Shockwave and understanding how the machines work, because we realized a few things. One, focused waves started coming about. Probably, I mean, focused waves have been along for a long time, like in lithotripsy,
Mhm.
but you really didn't see focused shockwave being used for GainesWave type treatments. And again, GainesWave is device agnostic. So some doctors were showing up with focused devices, radial devices, but then urologists started saying, look, you need to do it with a focused device. Focused devices are better. Look at the clinical studies, it's all focused. Um, and then they would say focused devices are true shockwaves. Now, it is true that focused devices are true shockwaves. It's also true that focused devices are not going to hurt the patient at all. They don't need numbing cream. They don't even really feel much of anything,
Mhm.
because there's no, I think one of the things is with radial waves, all of that energy is at the surface where your nerves are. So it's scattering along the surface. Focused wave, you're just going deep under the skin really fast. So they just don't feel anything and it's faster.
Okay.
So, but we really wanted to standardize the Shockwave device. We wanted to make sure that providers were using the best Shockwave device out there. Because I think if you could standardize and make sure doctors are using the same devices,
Mhm.
now people are going to have the same experiences.
So not just the protocols, but also the device they're using. Because again, going back to that, we still have, like, we have multiple devices, and it was one that, was recommended, but still there are so many devices that are out there. But I think that even with the ortho focused shock wave, when you look at studies, which is why I put it on hold to deeper dive into it, was the one that still you saw a lot of use in urology from a kidney stone standpoint. So you were, but not a ton of information on sexual wellness or ortho. And some of the studies that you looked at with ortho and focused shock waves, there were some injuries that were seen because it was so strong. And so until you could really deep dive into that. So that's where I trust the provider networks and networks such as, OmniWave and GainesWave to also assist in my deep dive, right? And so that's where I loved the fact that you guys had looked at the machines and looked at what machines would be best for delivery of the communication signal, which is really what we're doing with that acoustic shockwave. Uh, is we're communicating with the tissue that it's injured so that it can repair. And I love that. Again, I think it's a guy thing to look into the whys. It's like, from me, from a woman's standpoint, it's like the car thing. When it breaks down, I'm not looking at why. I take it to somebody else to tell me why and just get it fixed, right? So I'm good with the physiology part of it, but the machine part, I would not be. And so I love when somebody else and I can trust that they're looking as a partnership, then they're assisting me in the device standardization. So I really appreciate that you took the time to head this movement into focus shockwave and standardization.
It was actually very interesting because we've been on this journey to find out like what's the right machine now for probably 4 or 5 years. And when you look at the marketplace, like we realized pretty quickly that, like a focused wave is going to do a lot more. And we really want to look at focused waves. But we also noticed that almost every focused wave was either being made in Europe or made in China, which was a problem because you have to worry about getting parts. They do require a little bit more maintenance and parts than a radial wave. So we knew we wanted something that maybe we can get it here in the US. If we couldn't find anything in the US, so we've decided to really go out and manufacture the best device. And we talked to a lot of our providers and we asked them, what's important to you? And one of the things is, it's important that the device is portable. A lot of the devices you see, especially on the focused shockwave devices, they're not portable. They're really big, bulky devices. And when you actually look at what's out there, there really hasn't been a new generation of device in about 15 years. Most of the devices were made in the 1990s, 2010s. So you didn't see anything out there that was new. They all looked like 1990 copy machines. So we wanted to create something that was portable, sleek, had a nice, had a very nice user interface. The other thing we noticed with these focused shockwave machines out there was that the head itself could not you couldn't move the head at all. Like there were a couple devices that would use things you put on top, like little silicone pads, but
Mhm.
it was very inflexible. And I think the best analogy to think about it is if you're dropping a sound like a depth charge. Remember, like in a war, you'd have like a depth charge trying to hit a submarine.
Mhm. Yes,
You have a depth
of
charge
course,
go
I
down.
remember that. Yes.
Well,
Yeah, no,
back I guess
no, it's
we remember
I
it,
joke
but
only because I think that it's like, of course, it's like sometimes when we're talking about, again, more technical things or man-related things, I like to say that I'm like, yes, of course I know. I just agree at times, but so you're saying that connection. Go ahead.
well,
Interrupt
you
you.
you want to be able to change like that flex step. Like you want to be able. So like what I noticed is like none of the devices had that flexible head. Like you had to go like one depth down, which was kind of silly because if you're trying to get something at the surface and the focal zone's deep, you're not going to really hit it. Yeah, you have to lower the energy or do something. So one of the things we did is we created like a flexible depth system so you can do deep or shallow, which is also different. But we also made other changes to make the device completely comfortable. And to me, that's the biggest game changer because all of the devices on the focus side, they will hurt if you raise the energy high enough. It can be uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But we engineered our device completely with patient comfort in mind.
I know that was a big provider probably request as well, right?
It was because if something's not comfortable, people aren't going to want to sign up and people aren't going to want to finish the treatment protocol. So, like, doctors were saying, look, if you can create something that I don't need numbing cream, I could run it on a high energy level and I got results right away,
Mhm.
then I would get more and more patients signed up. I could take this out somewhere and do demo treatments and get people coming into my practice. And then finally, when I put people on a treatment plan, they're going to go all the way through it so that they can get 100% complete results. Because a lot of times with machines that are painful, is that they'll come in and do a couple treatments just to get out of the pain, but to get that full regenerative effects, to get the micronutrients and the collagen in there to heal whatever is going on, it does take 6 to 12 treatments. And if it's painful, they're not going to come all the way in for the full amount of treatments.
And so tell me a little bit, does this change the duration of each treatment, that the duration of how long it takes us to provide the treatment? I know obviously taking any numbing out of it, if people are using numbing, would take that down, but what about the duration of the actual treatment?
So generally, it takes about 10 minutes. You're doing about 2,500 to 3,000 shocks, 500 shocks on 5 to 6 points. And this is again for sexual wellness. And we also develop protocols for him and for her. So it works for both men and women. We realize that regenerative, non-invasive regenerative therapy, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you can still benefit. So like for urinary incontinence, rebuilding the pelvic floor, intensity of orgasm, lubrication, it's amazing. Just like the O shot. So like I like to tell providers, think of it as a non-invasive O shot or non-invasive P shot, even though like synergistically it's amazing. Or if you're adding like other regenerative therapies like exosomes, but really you're talking about non-invasive sexual regenerative therapy here. But something happened that kind of changed the whole game for us, and this is the thing I'm super excited about. And it kind of happened a little bit by mistake. Not, I wouldn't say by mistake, like, but we didn't think about it right away. And so once we decided we wanted to manufacture the devices here, we manufacture the devices right here in Florida. One of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to build prototypes. We built some prototypes, and this was 2 years ago. And we've been working on this whole plan for a long time. So just getting to the prototype stage, we felt good about, but we needed to test them. And I've already now have since sold my clinic, so I didn't have anybody we could test it with, and we tested it on a few people here. But testing for sexual wellness is actually a very weird thing if it's a not doctor not doing it. So like I wasn't going to test it for sexual wellness, but I'm a runner, and at the time I had gone 6 months unable to run because I had bad ankle issues. I had plantar fasciitis. My tendon in my ankle was like worn out. I had gone to a podiatrist who did X-rays, and she's like, "Oh, you might have to get surgery." And I was really upset. And I treated my ankle. Didn't hurt. Next day, pain was gone. I did it again 2 days later. I was running in a week. Pain never came back. It was pretty amazing. And so then I started like asking friends and family just in my circle, do you have any pain? And people were coming in with shoulder pain and pain in their knees and range of mobility issues, and people saying, "Oh, I have a frozen shoulder." And we started just treating them, like doing 3-minute treatments. And what we were finding was the pain would go away. Sometimes they go away right away in 24 hours. And we actually started recording some of this stuff. We got really amazing results. And then when we actually started selling the devices to practices, we told them about this pain angle. And what we realized is that as a like you in a practice, like the sexual wellness, obviously it's important. And there's going to be a certain subset of men and women who want to optimize their sexual wellness. But when you think about people who just want to feel good as they are aging, it doesn't matter what age you are. Like my daughter is 17 years old. She's a competitive gymnast and dancer. She uses the device when she's in pain and it fixes her right away. My son plays golf. He uses the device. My other daughter uses the device. My wife does hot yoga. She uses the device. My mom, her back hurts. She uses the device. I have the device. I have the device in my house, and what I realized is that your markets really any patient that you have who is dealing with any minor aches, minor pains, mobility issues, any aches, pains, mobility issues, you can help them. But
Mhm.
what happens, it's really amazing, is that when you help them, you can also explain to them, like you can almost even give them a 3-minute demo and then explain what you're doing. What we're doing is using we're using sound waves, or we're using this machine to basically um, get your body to start healing itself to get your body to heal itself right away. We're going to bring in blood flow. We're going to bring in collagen. We're starting the regenerative process. Now, if you could come back for 6 more treatments, we can fix whatever's going on. And I can also combine it with PRP or with exosomes or with
Mhm.
stem cells. So now it's becoming your go to. It's basically your key to all things regenerative medicine. And I do think regenerative medicine is going to be the wave of the future. Everything from exosomes to stem cells to PRP to red light. I see it.
Oh, there's all kinds of. So when our patients come in, it is more comprehensive, and our practice is comprehensive. We do aesthetics as well, but even if they come in for sexual wellness or hormones and they feel better, they want to do aesthetics, but they also have aches and pains. We do a lot of peptides for healing as well. And regenerative treatments just work very well with those. So again, if our patients coming in for hormones, they have some kind of repair issue because we just don't heal as well when we get older. And part of that is hormones. Our healing hormones are decreasing in the body. And so, yeah, no, I agree that comprehensive, when you get a go to office that you trust that addresses things comprehensively, we get to know our patients very well because of that. And so, yes, this would just be another adjunct that you can add into your hormone optimizing, you're healing better, you're doing some regenerative local treatment, sometimes peptides. Yeah, it's awesome. I think that those are conversations we have already with our sexual wellness patients about regenerative procedures, or likewise regenerative about sexual wellness. So I think this is a great device. So tell me a little bit about, so what we're saying is it OmniWave is the machine now. So now it is the machine and the protocol, but it's not just sexual wellness.
Uh,
It is
let me clarify it because I think there's so much. It's funny because, like, in my mind, it's very clear. I think it's so. I think I'll try to be so clear. It's GainesWave is really about educating consumers about this form of non-invasive regenerative therapy. And up to now, it's always been non-invasive sexual wellness regenerative therapy. Because we got to go out, we have to educate consumers that this treatment exists. What we've done on GainesWave is we've now in, expanded that to include non-invasive full body regenerative therapy.
okay.
So when you go to gaineswave.com, you're going to be able to find a directory listing and find people who are offering the For Him protocol, the For Her protocol, and the recovery protocol.
Okay.
So we have some doctors who only are interested in just doing sexual wellness for men. We have some who are only interested in sexual wellness for women. And we have others who just want to do the recovery protocols. So these are consumer facing sites. They've been trained for the recovery protocol. We need people to use machines that can go deep. So the machine that we recommend doctors have to provide the best results in the machine that we make sure that they get trained on is the OmniWave device. It's the device that we have right here, for example, is the device that we feel will help doctors achieve the best results and that the patients are going to be happiest with. And um, I would say hundreds of doctors already have the device in there. They're doing the recovery protocols. They're doing the For Him, the For Her GainesWave protocols, and the what we're getting back from the consumers is something I've just never seen before. Like we have like testimonials, like in-person testimonials, and I saw one early on where a woman was crying because she could not walk for 4 years. She was in a wheelchair, cane, could not walk. She had a GainesWave for recovery treatment on her knee. The doctor was using the OmniWave device
Mm-hmm.
to do it. So he was treating her using the OmniWave device, following protocols he learned on the GainesWave for Recovery website. And she threw away the cane after 2 treatments, was walking after, like, without anything after 2 or 3 treatments. She's crying, telling us how she's going to go with her daughter to Europe. And it brought her a new life. Like you see these like life changing stories. And the craziest thing is, it's the most non invasive treatment that easy for your like for you or anybody in your practice to do, and easy for your patients to do. It's not invasive. You could actually have a patient in and out in 15 minutes.
No medications and no,
No medications.
those are things that, because frequently, even when we look at urology and doing even just any kind of acoustic shock wave or sexual wellness, about a quarter of urologists are actually doing that. It's a low percent, right, for a, urologic condition. And so they will
That's
frequently ask if there's longevity, and or their arguments for those that aren't doing it is, it does it really, how long does it last? When I would say that nothing that we do from a traditional standpoint lasts. And so, but the longevity is there.
I think one of the things, like, it's when we first started doing GainesWave in 2016, the biggest question is, does it work?
Mhm.
We're way past that now. You can go and find clinical studies, you can find testimonials. Like GainesWave has, we've trained thousands of GainesWave providers over the years. As a result of what GainesWave done, other doctors have just done Shockwave without protocols. I would say that we don't know what machine they're using. We don't know if they're doing it right, but it's pretty clear that it works. Now, the question is, why don't you see it getting mainstream acceptance? And I have some opinions. I think it has more to do with the way the healthcare system works in the United States, because in other countries, like in Europe, you do see a lot more holistic treatments that get people better. But in the United States, our whole incentive structure is, how do we keep people who are sick? How do we treat them, but they still stay sick? Because if they get healthy or they die, the mainstream pharmaceutical companies and the mainstream doctors don't make money on that. That's a whole nother thing, but it creates an opening for doctors like yourself, like progressive doctors who see the future, and the future is happening now. I mean, with the, if you look at who now runs the HES, like with RFK Jr., he's all in on regenerative therapy. He's all in on this. This is the future of medicine, I think. But sometimes you have to get the mentality of doctors to change. And I'll leave you with a story, though, that made me think about this. Was that in the 19th century, there was a doctor in London. I don't know if you've heard this story, but it was super interesting. I read the book on this. And what he noticed was that when people would go get surgery, people could die after surgery. Like, people were dying at surgery. They couldn't figure out what was going on. The doctor's name was Dr. Lister. And what he noticed was, well, I think if you can wash your hands, like, and get rid of the germs on your hands and sterilize the instruments, people aren't going to die. And he was labeled a quack.
Mhm.
He was labeled a fraud. He almost got kicked out of the whole medical community. And doctors are like, this guy's crazy. This, like, who's heard of such a crazy thing? And it took about 20 years for doctors to realize, you know what, if we had just listened to him before, we would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. But it turned out he was right. And now you would, like, it's not even questioned. And I think that regenerative medicine is going to be seen in the same light.
Well, I agree, and we have lots of conversations with patients, but we've done a lot of video on it too. Just saying that traditional medicine's behind. It takes, I agree with you that the medicine of the future is happening now, but if we're waiting for studies to support it, number one, I think most of the sexual wellness studies are surveys, because it's hard to randomize, double blind something. You're either getting a shock wave and feeling it, or laser vaginal rejuvenation and feeling it or not. So it's hard to do a placebo on that, right? And so a lot of them are surveys, but a lot of the guidelines are written by societies that are big pharma funded, and that's just facts. And a lot of it's expert opinion, and those experts aren't actually treating those same patients, but the funding of the actual societies is done by big pharma. It's all over their meetings, everything. And so I think obviously you get the right study results when you have a lot of funding of it.
I want to, I think something like you just said, just, it's so funny, because, like, when you say experts, you're an expert, Deborah. You treat thousands of men, you treat thousands of women. You're a superstar. Like, you know what you're doing. You're there at the ground level, and to have somebody in some bureaucratic office somewhere, like, trying to dictate to you what works and doesn't work, I think is insane. And And I think one of the things you're now seeing is like they now have finally recognized that you are an expert. Like all the doctors out there on the GainesWave portal, they're experts. They're treating hundreds and hundreds of patients, and they know what they're doing, and they all learn from each other. And I think that's the way it should be.
Well, I think everyone that was even doing hormone replacement for the last 10 years, like you said, when you started, it wasn't accepted. And now all of a sudden, somebody decided it was acceptable, but there's still mixed, reviews on guidelines and societies.
Mhm.
But again, now all of a sudden, those that have been hormone specialists are now the specialists and the experts that have
Yeah.
been doing it. So I agree with you completely. Regeneration is where it's at, and you're not doing medications and surgery, and people aren't looking for that and don't really trust, the three-letter agencies, dictating things. Anyhow, unfortunately, maybe we'll move in medicine to gain that trust back. And hopefully that's the movement. But so next up for us, I'm coming down, for the OmniWave. So it'll be within the next, month, or definitely by the end of August. And then we'll try and do something when I'm down there, and then put it into practice as well. So I will see you soon, but it was great to hear from you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be on the podcast and sharing this new move towards the focus shockwave, and even the extension from sexual wellness for us to add it into longevity treatments as well. So, and then I look forward to the next time, which will be within the next 60 days, where we're going to sit down together, hopefully in person, unless if you're out of town when I.
I no, yeah, I'm going to make sure I'm in town when you're here because I love seeing you, and it's been a while.
Good. Well, awesome. Well, I
So
look
I'll make that a
forward
thing.
to seeing you for sure. All right, and then we're gonna just educate people more and more as we put it into practice. I'm ready.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate
All
it.
right, thank you. It was nice talking to you today, Mark, and you have a great one.
Thanks.
And let us know if you have any questions. Of course, we're willing to deep dive into anything, as you know, sexual wellness. So leave comments below if you have any questions for Mark or myself, or regarding Focus Shockwave. Let us know.